Hey, welcome. If you can hear me, would you let me know in the chat box? Yay. Thanks, Sherry. Hi, Susan. Hey, Emily. Elena, welcome. We have about one more minute before we get going. So as always, I'd love it if you'd share where in the world you are and then also what grade you teach. Hi, Carrie, Naomi, Kimberly. Awesome. Thanks for coming, everybody. Soriana, welcome. Hey, Laura. Hi, Trisha. Michelle, welcome. Whitney. B, hopefully I said that correctly. All right, Crystal, hello. Hi, Jessica. Carrie is a special education teacher in Ohio. Welcome, Carrie. Janae. Pia, welcome. Janet, is it Jeanette or Janet? Not sure. In Charleston, Illinois, first grade. Michelle's in Colorado, a kindergarten teacher. Welcome, Michelle. Elena is a reading tutor in Ohio. Welcome, Elena. Allison with 2 L's. Hey, Amanda. Megan from Marian University. Emily, Amber, Andrea, Jill from Illinois, a kinder teacher. Welcome, Jill. Allison with 1 L, like me. Welcome. Julie, Dara, Kelly, hey. Sherry's in Texas, teaching second. Welcome. Andrea in Maine. Cecily in Connecticut. Katie, Angela, welcome. Vanessa in California. Emily in New Jersey. Jessica from Australia. Awesome. Yay, Eulette. She's in. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for being here. I do want to go ahead and get started because it is that time. I appreciate you coming to hang out. Last night, the same workshop did go a little bit over. So I'm going to try to keep it to like an hour and 15, try to keep us on track, but hopefully we'll have plenty of time to answer your questions at the end. If you have any specific questions that you brought or anything comes up throughout, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our slides, but thank you again for being here, and I'm excited to chat about guided reading with you. Alrighty, so a couple of housekeeping items before we get going. There is a delay, so whatever you're hearing me say right now, I actually said like 20 or 30 seconds ago, so just something to keep in mind with the chat box. Speaking of the chat box, please do continue to let us know where in the world you are and what grade you teach, and then feel free to chat throughout the presentation. Ask questions, answer other people's questions, add on to what I'm saying. It's so nice to have all of you here and all of your collective expertise so we can all share ideas and learn from each other. You may want to grab paper and pencil to take notes. I did send out the slides beforehand, and the slides will be coming afterward too, but you may want to jot a few things down as we go here. And then before I give any presentation, I always like to say, I'm sharing what I've learned as a literacy specialist, and before that I was a classroom teacher in the primary grades. I do understand, though, that your school or district might have different requirements than what I'm sharing tonight. And of course, you have to do what's best for the kids in front of you. So all of that in mind, a couple of tech tips too before we get started. Hopefully it'll all be smooth sailing, but should something happen, there's always that reconnect button on your end that you can try first to see if that fixes the problem. And then you can always go back to those reminder emails and rejoin using the link. They do recommend Google Chrome as your browser. So if you are having issues, that would probably be a good thing to try, is using that browser. Dan, nope, you didn't miss anything. We're just getting started with some tech tips and housekeeping items. I'm glad you're here. All right, so I saw some familiar names. If you have been on a workshop before with me, thank you so much for coming back. I'm excited to chat with you again. And if we're not familiar with each other, hi, thanks for coming for the first time. My name is Allison, and I always say I'm a literacy specialist for K2, but actually this year I'm working with a bigger range. I'm working with pre-K through 3rd. But my classroom experience is in pre-K through 2nd. So I taught pre-K in the public schools, kindergarten for several years, 1st and 2nd, and then became a literacy specialist. And this is my husband, Jonathan. We live in the Nashville suburbs. We love to be outside whenever we can. Beautiful weather here today. Hopefully it is good weather by you. I know I have a friend in Michigan who I think had a snow day, so hopefully that's not the case for you. But we have two little fur babies. This is Max and this is Lindsay, so that's me. Just to give a little bit of context before we get going here, you might have noticed that I called this workshop Guided Reading 102. So the focus of our presentation is obviously guided reading, but you are going to notice that some of the basics of guided reading are not necessarily addressed, or they're addressed very quickly. Because the purpose of tonight, or today, depending on where you are in the world and what your time zone is, but the purpose of the workshop is to dig deeper into guided reading and your decision-making around guided reading. So that said, I'm assuming that you kind of have a working knowledge of what guided reading is and more or less how to do it. However, at the end of the presentation, if you feel like there are certain gaps in your understanding, or something that I didn't cover today, of course, feel free to ask, but also just know that in your freebie, I've included a link to a recording of the Guided Reading 101, or the more like foundational guided reading workshop. So you will have access to that. I give out the freebie at the end of the presentation. So if you end things and you're kind of like, well, I would like to learn a little more, then you may want to check out that workshop if it's not something that you've seen already. The link will again be in your freebie. So here are my goals for tonight. After our presentation, I hope that you will walk away knowing how to form effective groups, even if your data isn't nice and neat. I hope that you'll feel confident about exactly what instruction your students need during guided reading, or really just how to figure that out. I hope that you'll know if a text is just right for a group of students, or be able to figure out if it is right for them. Have some ideas about what to work on with high flyers who are good decoders, and then also have a little more confidence in knowing when to move your students up a level. So let me know how you feel about this stuff. Are these good goals for you? Is this stuff you want to work on? Are there other things you want to talk about? Just let me know in the chat box. Oh, hey, Janet. I was just talking about you. Welcome, Carmina. Okay, Andrea says, sounds good. Sherry says, perfect goals. Cool, cool. Sheila says, sounds great. Awesome. Okie doke. So also thinking that a lot of us, so it's April, right? It's April 17th. I can't believe it. A lot of us are maybe wrapping up our school year. My school year is over in about a month. So some of us are more like in the beginning of our school year, like if you're an Australian teacher or if you teach year round or whatever. But just know that some of this stuff you may be able to use and implement right away. And then other things you may just kind of want to mentally file away for next year. So hopefully it'll be a good use of stuff that you can use like right now, and also stuff that you can use next year too. All right, so just a few other things I want to address. If you have questions, please do type them into the chat box at any time. I will pause periodically and try to pick up the questions that I've missed. If I do miss your question, it's totally not intentional. I will address more questions then at the end. So if you're able to, please stick around and I'll make sure that I get to as many questions as possible then if I have missed yours. Also at the end, that's when I'll be doing the freebie. And we're also going to be doing a giveaway, so make sure to stick around live for that. So what I do for the giveaway is I just grab a list of everybody who's here live, and then I pull names, and then you will get to choose one of my guided reading bundles. And actually there's a little bonus too in addition to the big guided reading bundle that you can have. If you have that already by any chance, then you can pick something else. So looking forward to the giveaway at the end here. All right, so the very first thing I want to do today is really quickly review the parts that I include in my guided reading lessons. I know that your lessons may be a little bit different, and for tonight it really doesn't matter. But I just want to make sure that we're kind of on the same page, that you have kind of like a basis to know what I'm talking about, a little framework of sorts. So these are the 5 components that I usually include in all my lessons. I'll go more in depth on these in a second, but I start with fluency items. I introduce the book. or the part of the text that we're going to be reading. The kids read the book and I'm available to coach them. We talk about the content of the text and maybe a strategy. And then at the end, if there's time, we do some word work or writing. So this whole thing in kindergarten, it's usually 10 to 15 minutes. By now in the year, it's usually 15. First grade, also about 15. And then in second grade, I try to stick to 15, but sometimes I do find that with those longer texts, we end up going more like 20. So that's just kind of how I do things. The fluency items, these are just sort of warm-up things that get our kids started at the beginning of the lesson. My kiddos sit down, they start reading books that they've already read in previous lessons. I just have like different baggies of books in their bin and they pull books. Meanwhile, I say to one student, hey, Kellen, you're gonna be my star student today. So I have Kellen sit next to me and I have him read the text or part of the text that we read in the previous lesson, and I take a running record of his reading. I also get him to retell the text or the part of the text that we read. Don't usually get through a whole text unless it's like a really beginning level. But so while the kids are reading again, I'm doing the running record. When I'm done, I have them put their books away. And then if there's like a couple of sight word flashcards or something, that would be when we do this. Okay, so after these fluency items, which was, I didn't point this out, but just about 3 to 5 minutes, then I introduce the new text for the day and I tell the kids a little bit about it. And I try to get out any background information that they might already know, but at the same time, it's really a balancing act because the discussion has to be brief. It can't, go on. One time I blah, 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 blah. You know how kids get going, but I want to try to get some background knowledge out of them if I can, but still keep our discussion brief. If there's a word that I know is just going to totally trip them up, either they can't decode it or they don't know what it means and the meaning is essential to the text, then I will pre-teach it during this portion. But I don't want to take away all the work in the book, right? I want there to be some challenge left because the next part, when they actually read the book, I'm there to coach them. I want them to encounter challenges and I want to help them work through those challenges. So any pre-teaching that I do is pretty minimal. I don't do a complete book walk. I've just found that it takes too long and it just sometimes makes the kids, not always, but sometimes makes them a little bit less interested in the text, makes it, it just gives them a little more challenge if I don't show them everything in the book. So then, of course, we read the book, whether that's, a whole text or part of the text. It just depends on the level of the students that you're working with. And when the kids are reading the book, up through about level I, which is about like this time in the year-ish for first grade, up through about level I, they're whisper reading. They're whisper reading at their own pace. So I kind of listen in to different kids while they're doing that. And then level I or up is about when I have them start to read silently during guided reading. So in order for me to hear what they're reading, they're all reading silently, but I teach them that if I tap the table gently in front of them, then I want them to start reading aloud very quietly to me. So I might tap the table, have a child read aloud to me a little bit, or maybe ask them something and then go to another child and go to another child. So they're all reading silently at their own pace, but I have that little signal that I teach them when I want to listen in. Because I already took the running record back during the very beginning part of the lesson, that's usually when I take it anyway, I'm available to coach them, right? I can remind them of strategies, ask them questions. I also like to include these little visuals. I just stick them on the table. Like this one says, reread to better understand part of the text. It's a strategy visual. These come from my guided reading packs, which is part of the giveaway tonight. But these are just there to remind them like, hey, this is something that you can do when you're reading. Or another thing I might do is give them each a reading strategy menu. And this reading strategy menu just has different things like, pay attention to the word ending or read words in chunks, just different things that they learned that they can use to help them with their reading. So I like to have visuals there. I'm, of course, available to coach them. And I try to ask more questions than I do, tell them exactly what to do, because again, I want them to encounter challenges and I just kind of want to be enough of a support there to get them going in the right direction so that they can solve words and think about the text successfully. After they finish the text or part of the text, then we discuss it. And I always try to focus on the content first to really send the message that when we're reading a book, the purpose is to understand it, right? So immediately after the reading, I like to have them retell. By this point in the year, which for me is the end of the year, they know how to do a retelling basically on their own. So I'll just pick a student leader, and that student leader starts the retelling. And then they choose another person to continue the retelling. And so all the kids ideally get a turn to participate. I try to get them to correct each other and use the text also. And then afterward, I'll ask them maybe a higher level thinking question or two. And I have things like these sentence starters or sentence frames to help them respond. I think blank because blank. Getting them to use the text is a really big expectation of mine, and I just want to get them in the habit. So by like this time in the year, they just know that when they say something, they have to back it up with evidence from the text. Also try to get this to be as much as possible a true discussion rather than just me asking a question and them answering. I want them to talk to each other and ask each other questions. And that can be something that's tricky to teach at this age group. Most of us are working with K2, but toward the end of the year, that's something that we get a little bit better at. Also in this post-reading discussion, I sometimes mention, or I might teach even or review a strategy. Now, I get this strategy from a number of places. First of all, if I just go into the lesson and I'm like, this group needs to work on this strategy, then I may reserve it for this time after the reading. Occasionally I'll teach it before the reading, but sometimes that makes the before reading portion a little bit too teacher talk heavy. But anyway, so I may have pre-selected the strategy, or sometimes what I do is I don't have something in particular, but when I see the kids reading and I notice that, hey, this kid used this strategy and it worked really well, I might say, hey guys, you know what Mike did when he was reading? He did such and such. So I'll share that with them. Or I'm not doing all of these things. These are options. Another thing I might do is if I saw the kids struggling with a word and I'm like, oh, you know what? This strategy would have helped them. Then I'll make that decision and teach that strategy. So obviously not doing all of that, but I might, pre-plan or choose something the kids did or choose something that they could have done to teach during this time. And then at the very end, if we have time, we may do a little word work or writing. And, when I'm in the classroom, I teach writing at a separate time. And there's a time for phonics or word study or whatever. So if we don't get to this, it's not the end of the world. It's nice if you can do a little bit of work here, but I don't get stressed out about it if we don't have time. And these little activity things, these come from my guided reading packs as well, which again, will be the giveaway tonight. All right, so I know we went through this pretty quickly. If you have any more questions about any of this, please do watch that recording of the Guided Reading 101 workshop. I do spend a little more time on all of these components in that. And again, the link is gonna be in your freebie if you are interested in watching that later on. But now what we're gonna do is we're gonna devote the rest of our time together to talking about how to get a lot more confident in our decision-making around guided reading by really digging into some data. Now, when I was first imagining and planning for this workshop a while back, I was asking myself, like, okay, what can I share that will be most helpful, be helpful in figuring out what to teach and how to form groups and, how to know when to move kids up and just help with decision making. And I kept coming back to this idea of looking closely at data to help us with our decision making around guided reading. And then I kind of got worried, like, data, that's kind of boring. A lot of us are forced to over-assess our kids. There's data-driven this and data-driven that. And so I started wondering, like, is it a bad idea to focus on data? But I ultimately came to the conclusion that I could not teach this workshop and I couldn't present a more advanced look at guided reading without focusing on data analysis. And when I say data analysis, I don't mean just like gathering tons of data for data's sake. I mean gathering it and actually using it to help ourselves, to make life easier for ourselves and to help our kids. Because really what we observe our kids doing and what we learn about them as readers, that has to drive just about everything we do in guided reading. It helps us make groups that actually work. It helps us choose books or, provide teaching, helps us decide what word study activities even that they need to work on. And there is a way to assess and analyze data in a very manageable and kid-appropriate way. And doing that will provide you with so much information, and it really can make your life easier. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. So tonight I have some real data for you, and obviously the kids' names are removed, or I changed them, but we're gonna look at some stuff, and we're gonna use that data to talk about how and when to benchmark kids to get that data in the first place, how to form and adjust our groups, make plans from running record data, like what are we teaching in guided reading, and then use that information to talk about how to know when to move kids up or when we might need to adjust our groups. So first we're going to talk about benchmarking. I have this here to form groups, but really we're always gathering data. As I mentioned before, I take a running record at the beginning of every guided reading group. So if I see 3 guided reading groups in one day, that means I've taken 3 running records on different kids. So the first part, this is probably a little misleading. We're gathering data to form groups, but the first thing we're going to talk about is benchmarking. And benchmarking is a little bit more formal than just that, data collection at the beginning of the guided reading group with the running record. Benchmarking typically refers to like beginning of the year, sometimes middle of the year and end of the year, to really get a good sense of where your kids are as readers. And that's so helpful in setting up your groups from the beginning and just all sorts of decision-making around guided reading. So probably some of you have heard me talk about this before, but my favorite tool for benchmarking is the Fountas and Pinnell Benchmark Assessment System. There is a link to this in your freebie. I think it's pretty expensive. It would probably be something that your school would have to buy, but I really recommend it because it gives you just such like a good picture of what kids are like as readers. And so what you do to give this assessment is you sit with kids one-on-one and you give them a series of books to read that are leveled, and you take running records and you ask them comprehension questions. You rate their fluency. There is a writing component. I've never used it just because the assessment itself that I just described takes forever, but there is a writing component too, if that's something you want to look at. So it's very comprehensive. And this is something that I would give at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year. Now, I know some of us don't have this assessment kit, or maybe you do, but you run out of books. Like you've got a kid who's stuck at level A and they've already read the level A text, the fiction and the nonfiction. I think there's only 2 for each level unless something has changed. But let's say you don't have this kit or you run out of books, you're not out of luck, right? There's other ways to benchmark. And so if I have to benchmark my own way, if I have to kind of make something up, this is what I'll typically do. So the first thing I'll do is I'll find books that are leveled, that I know what level they are. And in your freebie, I've included some links for different sites that can help you figure out the level of a book, different things you can use to look up. But I want to use books that I know, like, okay, this is officially a level A, this is a level B, this is a level C. So I find those benchmark books, sit down with each child, start giving them books. I take running records. We'll talk more about running records and what they are later on. I'll score their accuracy. I'll see, what percentage of words they read correctly. I'll have them do a retelling and assess, how complete is their retelling. I'll ask them a couple of inferential thinking questions, being able to read between the lines, make inferences. I want to figure out if they can comprehend at that level, because the reading level is not just about accuracy, right? They have to be able to understand too. I'll rate their reading fluency. So not just reading speed, but also, are they reading smoothly? Are they reading with expression? All that good stuff. Then I'll also just make any anecdotal notes. Are they paying attention? Are they distracted? All that stuff will also typically go on the running record. So again, this is just what I do if I don't have access to this kit, because I know not everybody has this resource. DRA is another one that you can use to assess kids. I haven't looked at the DRA in like 10 years, but I've heard it's not similar, but you can get levels from that assessment too. Okay, so when you're benchmarking kids, you're trying to find out what their instructional reading level is, because that's what you want to target during guided reading. Their instructional reading level is the level where the book is a little bit hard, but not too hard, right? So the way you figure this out is just by looking at their decoding accuracy and also their comprehension. So here's what we're targeting. If we get to a level with a kiddo and they're reading with 95 to 100% accuracy and they have some, some comprehension, couple of comprehension issues, that's a good indicator that this book is at their instructional level and it would be good for guided reading. Or if the child's reading with a little bit lower accuracy, 90 to 94%, but their comprehension is good, that also might be a good level for them to work on during guided reading. We're also going to try to find their independent level, right? We want to know more or less like what level of book should they be reading when they're reading on their own. So if they've got a book at 95 to 100% accuracy, they're reading most of the words right and good comprehension, then that's a good indication that maybe we don't want to use that level of book in guided reading, but that's what we would expect to see them choosing when they're selecting books on their own. This hard level is just when we get to a level with a child and they read it with below 90% accuracy or 90 to 94% accuracy, but they got some comprehension issues, or any accuracy level, even 100%, and their comprehension is poor. If any of these things are true, this may not be a good book for guided reading or book level rather, for guided reading with them, because there's going to be so many challenges in the book for them that they're going to take too long, and it's not in their zone of proximal development. It's not just a little bit hard. It might be too hard at this point. Now, all of these figures come from the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system. However, whether you're benchmarking or just looking at your day-to-day running records, these are good guidelines to use when you're trying to figure out, okay, is this a good book level for guided reading, or is it too easy, or is it too hard? This is helpful to know. These scoring guidelines here, these are for levels A through K. Those are the Fountas and Pinnell levels, and so if you don't use those, just know that that's beginning kindergarten through like beginning second grade levels, just for some perspective. This is for if you're working with kids at level L and up, so like mid-second grade and up. The qualifications, they just change a little bit, right? When they're reading these higher levels, for it to be independent, we want even higher accuracy, good comprehension, instructional, this high percentage of accuracy with some comprehension issues, or 95 to 97% accuracy, good comprehension. And then for hard, anything below 90% accuracy, or any percentage with poor comprehension, or 95 to 97% accuracy and gaps in comprehension. This might not be a good level for you to be working with them during guided reading because it's probably just a little bit too hard, maybe a little bit out of reach. Okay, so if you have kids that are not even reading a level A book, or maybe next year at the beginning of the year, they're not reading level A yet, then this whole thing that I was talking about, this is not going to be helpful to you, right? You're not really going to learn about them and what they should be working on in guided reading because they can't read the books. So instead, these are some things that I look for when I'm working with pre-readers and assessing them to figure out small groups or beginning guided reading. So I want to see how many letter sounds they know. Letter names are helpful, but when it comes to actually being able to read beginning books, we don't open a book and start going M-A-T-C-H, A-D. That's not how it works. They need to know their letter sounds. So that's why, even though letter names are significant, when I'm looking at making guided reading groups, I just really look at letter sounds. Also look at their phonological awareness. That's a good predictor of how they're going to do when we start reading beginning books. Print concepts. Can they hold a book correctly? Can they point one to one? Those are things that I look at also. What I really like to do is sit them down when I know that we're going to be starting guided reading soon and have them try to read one of those basic books that just say something like, I see a ball, I see a truck, I see a doll. And so they're relying on the picture cues to figure out what the words say, right? So it's guess reading to some degree, which is okay at that stage. But I want to see, can they get the pattern? Do they know what to do? Because there's even if two kids know like 25 letter sounds or whatever, there's a big difference when one of the kids can pick up that book and you help them read the text and they've got it, versus a kid who maybe, they have the same number of letter sounds, but they don't know what to do with the book. They can't pick up on the pattern. Like, that's a good indicator of what kind of guided reading group your pre-A reader should be in. All right, I know I missed a bunch of questions, but I know that you are answering each other's questions, which is awesome. Thank you. Okay. So Janet says, my teaching colleague uses the instructional level for the students to pick books for their book boxes. What is recommended? I don't feel confident that this is what we should be doing. So Janet, what I have always done is thought of the instructional level as mostly for instruction, and the independent level is for more like independent reading. So when they're reading independently, I don't monitor their reading so closely that I enforce that they're always in their independent reading level. I really believe in giving kids a lot of choice. Now I do structure some of that choice for sure, but I target their independent reading level, which would be something that's easier for them than their instructional level, because the whole point of an instructional level is that it's in their zone of proximal development and they can read that level of book because you are there and because you're there providing that instruction, hence the name instructional level, to give that supportive teaching. So that's not something that I do. I know other people are chiming in too. Okay, I'm gonna keep going just because we have so much to cover, but again, I will circle back. I'll try to get to everybody's questions, and I appreciate you all answering each other's questions too. All right, now let's talk about how we take that data and form our groups. So I'm very kind of hands-on and visual when I make my groups, and sometimes this is out of just pure necessity because I work at a smaller school now, but I used to work at a pretty big elementary school, and I was doing all of the bilingual reading intervention groups for kinder, first, and second. So it was a lot of kids. So there was a lot of moving stuff around. And when I had to do that, I really found value in doing a little summary sheet of each kid's benchmark data. So I could then physically move the sticky note or the little sheet around as I was making groups. So I created a template for you so that you can do the same thing, basically. And I kind of zoomed in here. But what I put on a summary sheet is the student's name, obviously. I take their benchmark data and I write the highest instructional level on it. So sometimes kids show up to be instructional at more than one level. Sometimes you'll have a kid where, you give them the level J book and it shows that they're instructional at J. I don't stop then. I give them the K book because sometimes they show up as being instructional at K too. It's really not an exact science. So I push them as far as I can go. When I get a hard book, I'm like, okay, that's too hard. I went too far. But I put the highest instructional level. So in my example of the J and K situation, J is instructional for the kid, K is instructional for the kid. I would write K here. The next thing I do is I write their accuracy percentage for that level. So HIL stands for highest instructional level. So if they read that level K book with 98% accuracy, that's what I write there. Next, I write the reading rate also at that level. And when I say reading rate, I don't mean fluency. Reading rate is a component of fluency, but fluency also encompasses things like phrasing words together and attention to punctuation. And all of that stuff absolutely is important, and it's stuff that I address. But you're going to see in a minute when I start talking you through moving around the kids, you're going to see why I really just focus on reading rate, because reading rate will tell you if kids are going to mesh together well in a group or not. We'll talk more about that in a second. But so for the reading rate, I'll rate them, no pun intended. I'll rate them 1 through 3. Are they 1, super slow, or 3, pretty speedy? And so I'll just write that number there. At the highest instructional level, I'll put a number or score for their comprehension. The Fountas and Pinnell you do get a comprehension score from it, but the number of total points, it varies depending on the level. So when I've got kids at a variety of levels, what I do instead of writing the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark number is I will just write either plus for strong comprehension, meaning basically 100%. If their comprehension was okay, they maybe missed a little bit, I would put a plus and then a slash and a minus, and you'll see this in the sample data in a second. And then if their comprehension was poor, I'd put a minus. Okay, that was all for the highest instructional level. how well did they read it, or how accurately did they read it, how fast did they read it, and how did they comprehend. That goes on their summary sheet. Now, these two things are a little bit different. I look at the level that was one level lower than their instructional level. So HIL -1. In the J and K student example, they were instructional highest at K. Their highest instructional level -1 would be J. So I just took it one down. And you'll see why I use this information in a minute, but I write down the accuracy in this example of how accurately did they read that level J book. And I also write down how well did they comprehend that level J book too, or whatever their highest instructional level -1 is. So you'll see in a second why that data can be really valuable to have on their summary sheet. Okay, so like I said, you're gonna get a template for that in your freebie. I also in there have a template for you for your pre-readers, just if you wanna do something simple like number of letter sounds, and then how well did they do reading a pattern text. Like I talked about earlier, are they able, were they able to pick up on the pattern? Were they able to try to point one-to-one? So that's kind of what I use to make the groups for pre-readers. All right, so now we're gonna look at some real student data. And if we were at an in-person workshop, which I would love to see you all in person, glad we can connect over the internet, but it would be great to do it in person, because what I would do if you were actually physically here with me is I would give you these little summary sheets for each kiddo, and we would work together to physically put them in groups. Now, obviously we're not together, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to simulate this experience the best that I can. And in those emails that I sent out before the workshop, where I was, saying print this before the workshop, the example data is in there. Now, if you weren't able to print it, not the end of the world. I am going to right now, I'm going to link you to, where is it? Sample data. I'm going to put up a little link and you can download it. Always be a little bit careful, because sometimes if you open a new window, then this window here that we have together, sometimes that crashes. So open with caution. If you already have it, don't open it. But here is the sample data, because I have this right in front of me here. Probably hear my papers rustling. I have this here, and that's what I'm going to be talking from, and it's really going to help you if you're able to follow along so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you've got that sample data, go ahead and turn to these 2 pages here. And this is real data from a 1st grade class. This was at the beginning of the school year, and I changed all their little names, 20 kiddos. And I organized the data on these sheets in order, so the levels go from high to low. So for these little summary sheets, I've got what I was talking about earlier. I've got information from their highest instructional level, and I've got also a little bit of information from the level that was one before their highest instructional level, their highest instructional level -1. So all that data is there. I'm going to start talking specifically about kids in a minute, so that's why it'll be super helpful if you're able to follow along and know what I'm talking about. All right, so this is obviously a lot of information. What I did is I just said, okay, how many A's do I have? How many students are reading at level B, C's, D's, et cetera, et cetera. And so as you can see, the scores are a little bit all over the place. We've got some A's, great, but then we've got this little B friend. What are we gonna do with them? We've got a ton of level C's, and that's great, but this is thinking, this is beginning of the year 1st grade. So this is too many kids to have in one group. So we got to think about breaking them up. We got the level D's, got some little stragglers here, and then we have an outlier for sure. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to a different software program. You're going to see the screen go blank for just a second, but I'll be back, fingers crossed. And in this other software program, I'm going to be able to move the kids around and talk to you while we're looking at this data about how I grouped them and why I did it. So bear with me for 1 second here. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you should see my second screen now, and I've got their levels, but I've also got names. So now I'm gonna start talking about them by name and moving them around to group them. So first we've got our level A's, right? they can go together, that's fine, but we need to figure out what to do with Denise. Now, Denise is a level B. If you find Denise's data on that sheet with all the different little numbers and everything, we see that when she read the level B text, she read that with 92% accuracy. So not extraordinary, right? Her reading rate was slow. It was only a 1. Remember, I rated them 1 out of 3. So her reading rate was pretty slow. Comprehension was good. So now when I look at how she did at level A, because level A is her highest instructional level -1, she read that with 94% accuracy and her comprehension was good. Now looking at Denise, I'm asking myself, can she go up or can she go down? And what I'm thinking is that because her accuracy was not super high at level B, and she read it pretty slowly, and when she read the level A text, her accuracy wasn't like over the roof, you know, it was only 94%. This tells me that it's okay to put her with the level A kids. Hopefully we can move them up to a level B text pretty soon, but she's really not ready to move up to C. She needs to solidify her work in a level B because she's probably gonna flounder. You know, any of you who work with these levels and know, you know, the Fountas and Pinnell levels, B and C, those are pretty different levels. So she needs to work with level A, hopefully get into level B soon, rather than being pushed up. So this is why I put Denise with my level A's. Okay, so now we have all the level C's, and we need to ask ourselves, how can we break these level C's into 2 groups? And so going into this, I was like, okay, I wanna have a lower level C group and I wanna have a higher level C group. And just looking at them, you wouldn't know how to do that, right? So that's why doing these summary sheets, that's why this is so valuable, because you just get so much more information about, should they go in the lower level C group? Should they go in the higher level C group? So we're gonna look at each of these kids individually. If you find Evan, he read the level C book with only 90% accuracy. He read it slowly. I marked his reading rate as 1. Comprehension was good. When he read that level B book, highest instructional level -1, his accuracy was only 93%. Comprehension was good. So that shows me that Evan probably belongs in the lower of the level C groups because his accuracy, his reading rate, and his accuracy even on the level B book wasn't spectacular. So now we look at Felicia. Her accuracy was 94%. Reading rate was okay, it was a 2, comprehension was good. Her accuracy at level B was the same, 94%, comprehension was good. So I'm gonna put her in the lower level C group just because, mostly because of her accuracy. Now let's look at Gregory. He read that level C book with 98% accuracy, read it pretty quickly, comprehension was okay. When he read that level B book, he read that with 100% accuracy and his comprehension was strong. So I believe that Gregory belongs in the higher of the 2 level C groups because he's pretty solid with level C and he was very solid with level B. That's why I like having that, you know, again, that highest instructional level -1 because it gives you a little more insight, like not just how do they do at their instructional level, but when they read a little bit of an easier book, was it super easy or was it just like they barely passed? Okay, now looking at Harrison, he read the level C with 92% accuracy, decent rate, good comprehension. When he read level B, that was 95% accuracy with okay comprehension. Because of his 92% accuracy at level C, I'm gonna put him, in the lower group. Then we look at Ivan. He read level C with 96% accuracy. He's fast. I rated him as a 3 for his reading rate. Comprehension was okay. Level B, he read 98% accuracy, strong comprehension. So I'm gonna put Ivan in the stronger group just because, partially because of his reading speed, but also because at level B, he did quite well with that. So he's definitely a solid C. Now we've got Juana, 95% accuracy at level C, okay comprehension, slow reading rate, and not super strong at level B either. She like barely passed level B. So I'm gonna stick her with the lower group. Then we've got Christopher with a K. He read, let's see, there we go. He's on the other page. He read level C with 94% accuracy. His reading rate was solid. It was a 3. Comprehension was good. Accuracy was 98% at level B, and his comprehension was good. So I'm gonna put him in the higher of the 2 groups. All right, so we've got most of this done. Remaining, we have these level Ds that go together. And then we've got Perry. So is Perry going to go up or is Perry going to go down? Looking at his data, he read level E with 95% accuracy. He read it slowly and comprehension was okay. At level D, his accuracy was 96% and his comprehension was okay. So he kind of barely passed level D. So, well, not barely passed, but he wasn't extraordinarily strong. So I'm going to put him with the level Ds just because he's not, he did okay with the level E, but his reading rate was slow, and we can solidify him more with level D text and hopefully push him back into E's soon. Now we've got Quentin. Can he go with the G's? Hopefully, but let's check. He read level F with 94% accuracy. Reading rate was fast. Comprehension was strong. With the level E book, one level lower, he read that very well, 100% accuracy, strong comprehension. So I feel confident putting him with Rebecca and Samantha. Now, the only little guy we have left is Trent. And we talked about last night, a lot of us sometimes have an outlier either on the high end or sometimes the low end. Now, if you have an outlier on the high end, here's what I like to do. I like to, first of all, sometimes include him in this guided reading group because I want him to have that experience of talking about a text with other kids. However, I still want to make sure that I meet with him independently to really challenge him and give him books during our one-on-one conferences that will be at his instructional level. And ideally, in a perfect situation, I will have other grade level team members. Maybe I'm teaching first grade, like in this case, and I've got other kids in other sections of first grade that are also, maybe they're an I or a J or a K. So in a best case scenario, I can pull those kids into my classroom and have a guided reading group that's more on his level. I don't have him as a guided reading group of one because that's not a group, right? That's a one-on-one conference. And those are definitely powerful. But when it comes to having that, discussion and a true guided reading lesson, then he needs to have some opportunity to participate just like all the other kids do. So that's what I do when I have an outlier who is higher than the other kids. All right, so that was everybody. Let's go back to the other presentation so that you can see how everything shook up. I put color coding so it's hopefully clearer. Okay. So this is how the groups ended up. I put that little star by Trent just because, he's a special situation. But that's how everything turned out. And hopefully you were able to follow along with that data. I know it was a lot of information, but let's see if I missed any questions here. So Stephanie is asking about the software program. It's just, so I use a Mac. And there's something called Keynote, which is the Mac version of PowerPoint, and that's all I did it in. It's really nothing fancy. You could do it in Word as well. Okay, so Darcy says, do you ever consider behavior and work habits when trying to decide between two groups for a student? Yeah, absolutely, Darcy. So reading rate is like one reading behavior, right? And that definitely goes into it. I don't want to put a kid who is a slow reader in slow pace wise, who reads slowly into a group that's, that's higher, right? So if I had to bump a kid up just for logistics, I wouldn't bump up one of my readers that reads slowly. Similarly, with your question, Darcy, I wouldn't probably bump up a kid that has a lot of behavior issues unless I feel like they're going to be bored, right? But if a kid has a lot of behavior issues and I feel like a higher group might challenge them too much and they're just going to goof off to get out of the work as a result, then I might bump them down. So long story short, I definitely do take those types of things into consideration. If like with this example, there were a lot of D's, right? I wouldn't necessarily take a D out of this group. Really, the behavior would only come into play if I'm thinking about do I need to group together, different levels? Do I need to bump a kid up or down? That's more so when I consider those sort of things. Okay, so Andrea has a good question, and this came up last night. What do you do with outliers at the low end? So last night there was a teacher who, I can't remember her name, but she had a level A kiddo, and then her next highest group was level E. So obviously there's a big gap there. With a low outlier, I handle that a little bit differently then I do a high outlier. So with the low outlier, same thing where if there's kids at that grade level that I can pull together, like maybe another first grade teacher has a level A kiddo, if I can pull them together, I will do that. Just have them switch classrooms or whatever. I do, however, want to make sure, like in her example of having a level A, a student at level A, and then the rest are like E and up, I do want to make sure to spend plenty of time conferring one-on-one with that student, probably doing some intervention if there's that much of a gap. Now, let's say that you have like one level A and then you have like B's or C's or whatever. One other thing that you can consider is to read the book, like you're going to read a book about cats with your level B or C group. Take that book about cats and read it with or read it to that level A student. So once that level A student knows how to read the book, then bring him into the guided reading group. So he's going to be successful with that book because he's already had that support. It just honestly depends on what your situation is. If you have other team members that you can collaborate with to pull a group together. And it also depends on what your next highest group is for a low outlier. But for sure, for low outlier, I would definitely try to get a lot of one-on-one conferences in. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so planning. Now we've got our benchmark data, right? It's taken forever for us to do and we feel so accomplished, but we still have to make our plans, right? But the good thing is about getting all this benchmark data, you have a lot of stuff to go on. You know, you gathered all this information that can really help you in your planning. And the same goes for those running records that you take at the beginning of each guided reading lesson. That really can help you with your planning. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you some actual running records. They weren't from benchmark assessments. They were just day-to-day running records, but the process that I go through is basically the same. I'm looking for what do they need to learn and, what do they already know well. So we're going to look at those real running records. And I'm going to just show you my thinking about like what I was doing when I looked at their running records and figured out what to teach them next. So before we start looking at that though, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about doing our running record markings. And I know that different schools have different systems. I am trying to consistently use the benchmark assessment system scoring. I think I learned like the reading recovery method and then I didn't fix that I was doing that until pretty recently, but I'm trying to use this consistently because it's from the benchmark assessment system. But anyway, when I'm taking a running record, and I can do this either when the words are on the page or with just a blank sheet of paper, either way. When a child reads a word correctly, I'll write a check mark. The reason why I do this is because if you only mark down when they make a mistake, some kids will notice. So if you're always writing, you're always making check marks, then they won't notice if you have to stop and write that they made a mistake. So speaking of mistakes, if they do make a mistake, they misread the word or they sound it out like they say at, and they don't say the full word, then you write what they said instead. You draw a line and then you write the correct word under it. Let's say that they do that, but then they fix their mistake. You would then draw a line down and then write SC for self-correction. If they just skip the word entirely, what I do is I write a dash over the correct word. They insert something, I do a little caret. They ask me for help, I write an A. If they go back and rerun it, try it again, I draw an arrow. And then if I have to give them the word because they're just so stuck and we can't move on, then I'll write a T. So that is how I scored it, or that's how I scored both of the running records on there. And here's how I counted errors. And again, I believe this is accurate and reflects what is said in the benchmark assessment system. So if a child misreads a word, sorry, the highlighting is not spectacular. If a child misreads a word and they don't fix it, then that counts as an error. And I mark a little tally for an error in one of the right columns, which is what you'll see if you look at that sample data that I gave you. If they read a name or a proper noun incorrectly, like they don't read the word Allison, the name Allison correctly, and they keep misreading it over and over, I note that, but it only counts as one error. So that's true of a name or a proper noun, like if they can't read California or whatever. If a child sounds out a word or says the chunks, but doesn't say the complete word, so I forget, I had a kid say like, I don't know, for example, at, but then he didn't say cat, then that counts as an error. And sometimes you have kids who know what the word is, but they just don't say the whole word. So if I think that's the case, I might stop them and say, hey, what was that word? And if they can immediately say it, then I know that they knew it. And then I'll tell them, hey, you know, when you're reading, after you sound out a word, that's great, but I want you to say the complete word too. So sometimes you might have to prompt them just so that you're not counting errors when they actually do know how to read the word. If a child inserts a word, that counts as an error. If they skip a word, if you give them a word, that's an error. And then on those running records, you're also going to see these cueing systems marks. I believe that I put them on these running records for you. Now, this is not something that I do every time I take a running record. It takes a little bit of time, but you get faster at it. But what this is this is a way of asking yourself, when a child made an error, or when a child self-corrected, fixed an error, were they thinking about what made sense? Did they read, for example, bunny instead of rabbit? That still makes sense. Were they thinking about how sentences sound? You know, did they replace a noun with a noun or a verb with a verb? Does the sentence still sound okay? Or, because they could be using all of these information systems. Are they using visual, the letters on the page? If it says bring, do they say, you know, brought or something else with a BR? Are they using the letters on the page? So the interesting thing is that when kids make errors or when they make and fix errors, that gives us a ton of information. So that's why on the running record that I gave you or running records that I gave you, you'll see that I coded the errors and the self-corrections as, did they use meaning? Did they think about what made sense? Did they use the sentence order? Did they think about what sounded right? And did they use phonics cues, the letters on the page? So you'll also see that on those running records. If you'd like, go ahead and turn to that page that has level D, the swimming lesson on it. You actually probably don't need to have that in front of you, but just know that this is where the stuff that I'm sharing is coming from. What I did is I took errors and self-corrections and I grouped them so that we could talk about them more easily. Now, this chart, you know, I did this after I took this running record, but this is not something that I would do after I take every running record because that would take forever. I would never sleep. I would have no life. But for our purposes here, I did create this chart because I wanted to group for you errors and self-corrections that kind of went together. And then from those, you know, errors or self-corrections, I wrote what I learned about the reader and also what I did instructionally or what I planned to do instructionally afterward. So this chart, again, is just for our purposes, but we're going to go through the errors and I'll talk about what I learned from them about this little guy. All right, so I grouped these three errors together. He said lack instead of lake. He said Tim instead of time and Nick instead of nice. And so these three errors showed me that he's not consistently applying what he's learning in word study about silent E to his reading. And interestingly, we were working on silent E in word study with, you know, that's what we were working on at that time when I gave this running record. And so when I saw him doing this, I was like, ah! But so what that showed me then and what I did afterward is I had to help him make the connection between the phonics activities we were doing and his reading. So I needed him to apply what we were learning to his actual, decoding. And so what I did, or one thing that I did was I got some books, like just printable books that he could mark on. And I had him go through, and before we read, I had him highlight silent E words. You know, oh, there's a silent E. This word has a silent E, so it has a long vowel. So we talked about it before we read. And then once he read the book, then the highlighting was there and he was much more likely to attend to the long vowel, silent E. So that was one activity that we did that helped him really make the connection. I also stuck these two errors together. He said swim instead of swimming. He said tud instead of shouted. And both of these words have inflectional endings. We've got ing, we've got ed. So level D is really one of the first levels where these inflectional endings pop up. And so this showed me, hey, he's not familiar with them or he doesn't have strategies to manage them. So I then taught him explicitly what ED was, what ING was. We talked about that. And this strategy really worked for him. What I did was I taught him, hey, when you get to a word and you see that it's longer, it has an ending, cover up the ending with your finger. Just read the first part and then uncover the ending, read the ending and put them together. So he would take his little finger and cover up ING. He'd read swim. He'd uncover, read ing, swim, ing. So that strategy really helped him with attending to those inflectional endings. All right, I grouped these three things together. He said went instead of want. He didn't fix it. But when he said wetter instead of water, he did fix it. And then he said div instead of dive, and he fixed it. So this showed me that when we talked about all those cueing systems, does it make sense? Does it sound right? Does it look right? He is thinking about all of these things when he's reading and fixing his mistakes, right? He realized that even though this word kind of looked like div, he realized, oh, that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't sound right, and he fixed it. Same thing with this. So because he was using all these different things, he was thinking about, does it sound right? Does it make sense? Does it look right? I praised him and I said, hey, you fixed that. You noticed that it didn't make sense and you fixed that word to say water or whatever it was. So just stating what he's doing, he might not have thought about it. Oh yeah, I am thinking about what makes sense. So restating what he does is good for reinforcing it and getting him to do it more. On the other hand, he was not consistently thinking about all of those things at once. So when kids are reading, we want them always to be noticing, hey, does what I read sound right, look right, and make sense? He wasn't always thinking about all three of those things all the time. So he read to for the, he didn't fix it. Nick for nice, didn't fix it. Totally skipped the word did. And he read grant for great. So this showed me that he really needed to monitor and cross-check. What I did is I just used modeling and think alouds, hey, I think I got that word wrong. That didn't sound right, or that didn't look right. Let me think about what makes sense, or let me look at the letters more closely. So I just had to do a lot of modeling and think alouds to make sure that he knew that, we can't just look at the letters and guess something that looks similar, right? We have to think about what makes sense too and fix it if it doesn't. I was seeing him one-on-one for intervention, but partner reading is also great for this. If I could pair him up with a student and have that student ask him, hey, did that make sense? Did that sound right? That would be a really helpful activity for him as well. All right, so that was a level D. Now let's look real quick at the information from the level I running record. This one was longer. And again, I just grouped these little errors so that we could chat about them. These two mistakes from the level I running record went together in my mind because he read bract instead of break. He read cross instead of course. And at this point, I knew that from his other reading and the rest of the book that the rest of the words he did read correctly, he did have a lot of those long vowel spelling patterns down, but the trickier patterns like E-A, O-U-R, those were still hard for him. So I gave this running record at the end of last year, but my recommendation was that he learn more about the vowel teams. And then I also wanted him to get that strategy of, try the short E, try the long E, try different vowel sounds until he got one that made sense if, he couldn't read it for whatever reason. And then he also just needed to learn those more complex R-controlled spelling patterns like O-U-R that he struggled with here. I put these two things together. He read following instead of falling, and then he read happened correctly. This was really a check on the page. But so these two things showed me that he pays attention to those inflectional endings, ing, right? Even though he didn't read this whole word correctly, he got the ing, he got the ed. So this was something that I just wanted to praise and reinforce. Hey, I can tell that you're paying attention to all the different word parts and looking at the ending, just to encourage him to do it some more. This one thing in this part, he said handlebars, and then he fixed it to handlebars. And then here he said sidewalked instead of sidewalk. This little guy was all about the visual cues. He was, like with this example, he's looking at the letters and he's usually getting something that at least somewhat looks like the word. But he really needs to also pay attention, again, to what makes sense and what sounds right. And one thing that you can do that's pretty fun for kids to help them learn to monitor is you can record them reading like a brief passage, just using like an iPad or a tablet or whatever, and then play it back for them. Have them follow along with the book while they listen to themselves, and then they will notice, or they should notice, hey, I read that and that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't sound right. So freeing them up from the decoding and just having them listen, literally listen to a recording of their own reading can be helpful in teaching them how to self-monitor. Last little thing here is that I wrote this note on the page that he was reading word by word and his voice was going up at the end of each word. So he was not reading very fluently. He wasn't using his voice to reflect punctuation, phrasing, or meaning. So these are all things that I would need to model and teach him one at a time, just to practice in the future. All right, so as I said, I do not do this for every single running record. I created this chart just to break things down for you and give you an example of how I would think about it. But what I have provided in your freebie is this running record analysis and reflection form. And this is something that you might just want to try out as you're doing some running records or maybe at the beginning of next year. And it'll help you look for different things like, okay, how's this kid doing with R-controlled vowels, compound words? It just kind of shows you things to look for. Are they paying attention to what makes sense? Things like that. And it's mostly decoding related. Of course, comprehension is also important, but if you're looking at a running record and you're looking at errors and self-corrections, this can kind of help you break it down. This helps you know what to teach and what to focus on, whether it's like strategy use or phonics. And so what I would recommend if you'd like to try this from your freebie, print some copies and then just do it for a little while. And what you'll find is that the more you fill these out, the easier it becomes for you. So now like at this point, sometimes it is helpful for me to have this sheet, but mostly I'm just able to look at a running record and the patterns kind of jump out at me and I know what I should teach. But if you want to get to that point and you don't feel like you're there quite yet, filling this out for some kids will probably be a good step in the right direction. Again, I do not do this for every single running record that I take. All right, now I also want to talk real quick. I know we're over our hour, but I want to make sure we're not too far away from the live giveaway, so we'll just keep rolling. But some of you might be wondering, I've got kids who maybe decoding is not an issue for, right? There's other things going on, but they don't have a lot of errors. So how do I learn about them as readers and how do I know what to teach them? In your freebie, I've got this whole big long list of things to consider. So obviously when you have kids who are reading with high levels of accuracy, it doesn't mean that they don't still need to work on things or that they shouldn't be in your guided reading groups. So here are just some things that you might want to consider teaching them instead of like your decoding focused strategy points. So one thing to focus on is fluency. Are they reading with expression and are they paying attention to punctuation? Does their voice show that they really understand what the text is saying? And are they maybe phrasing words together appropriately or just reading? Are they reading word by word? Those are all things that you might want to address with them. Then there's vocabulary strategies. In my experience, even my kids who read with very high levels of accuracy, they might just be skipping over the words that they don't know. Like they decode them, but they don't stop and consider, hey, I don't know what this means. I need to use context. Vocabulary strategies are something that you can address with those good decoders. And of course, kids who don't decode very well, but we're just focusing on those super decoders right now. So then there's monitoring comprehension. We want our kids to notice when they space out or when they don't understand something. They need to be taught to go back and reread or fix up their comprehension. Some of your kids, even though they're decoders, maybe literal recall isn't so strong. Maybe they need a lot of prompting to retell. So that's something that you can work on with them. Or inferential thinking. Can they understand the author's bias or why an author might have written that book? And then, of course, there's text features. Because what I found is that even with kids that are really good decoders, sometimes, and even sometimes good comprehenders, sometimes they're reading the main text and maybe they look at the text features, but they're not learning from them and integrating that knowledge with what they're learning from, quote unquote, the rest of the text or the regular words on the page. So again, in your freebie, which is coming super soon, there's different questions just to help you think about what you might work on with kids that are already decoding very well. I'm going to skip questions just for now again because we're a little short on time. And I want to make sure that everybody is still here for the giveaway. So we now, through our little process that we've gone through tonight, we've benchmarked our kids, we've made our groups, we've figured out what to teach them. And that benchmark data that we gather is really valuable, but it only carries us for a little while. Especially in the primary grades, kids just grow and change so quickly. So the benchmark data, maybe that's relevant for a couple of weeks, a month, but then we need new information. So that's why it's so helpful to take those running records on a consistent basis. You just get in the habit, and so you always have that, information available to you about, okay, this kid needs to work on that, or, maybe this is not the right level of text for them. So I just find it so helpful to always be taking running records throughout the year. And that way, so like, let's say you have a class of like 20, 25, usually if you're taking running records consistently like that, you'll get through your entire class about every 2 or maybe 3 weeks. If it just doesn't fit well into your guided reading lessons, maybe you take them at a different time of the day. But however or whenever you want to take them, I really feel like if you want your kids to move forward and you want to be more confident in your decision making, you've got to continuously take those running records and also monitor their comprehension with the books that they're reading. We talked about this earlier, and we've talked about this kind of throughout tonight, but when I take one of those informal running records, I may not have them read the whole text just because we may not have time. If I can get them to read 50 or 100 words, then I can still get a lot of information from that. And I said this before, but I always have them retell because it's not just about the decoding. Want to see also maybe if they can answer a question, an inferential thinking question. And so that way, once I've got all this, I can later, when I'm making plans for the next week, just look over it and say, okay, is this level of text good? I've got a couple of running records from that group. Does it seem like the level is good? Is it too easy or too hard? And then I can make adjustments and also just figure out what to teach. In addition to those running records, not to bog you down with assessment stuff, but level-specific checklists, especially when it comes to tracking things like strategy use and comprehension, those are another tool that I really like using during guided reading. And I don't use them quite as often as I use the running records, but when I can, I'll, start filling out, like, let's say Kellen's at level K, and I'll start filling out a reading behaviors checklist for Kellen. I have them available separately, but they're also in my guided reading packs. But these just kind of specify things that Kellen should be working on when he's working in level K. So does he apply his knowledge of known word patterns? Does he comprehend different types of dialogue? It not only shows me like how is he doing with these level K skills, but it also guides me in figuring out what to teach. So that's why I created these level specific checklists, and I really like using them because they guide me. Sometimes for those higher readers, they can be more helpful than the running records, and they also guide me in remembering what to teach at each level. Okay, so last but not least, when to move our kids up. Now, we all want our kids to move up quickly, right? In an ideal world, that's what we want. But it's not a bad thing for kids to spend a little extra time at a level, especially if they're maybe decoding well at that level, but maybe their comprehension is not completely solid. So to know when it's a good time to move up a child, just use your ongoing running record data and go back to those scoring guidelines. This is what we were talking about before, which, let's say that you read with a child during guided reading and they read that book with 95 to 100% accuracy and really good comprehension. Then that to me is an indication, hey, this level of text might be getting easy for them. It might be time to move them up. But I don't move them up immediately. I wait until I give another running record. And if that second running record shows me that they're still independent with this level of book, then that tells me, I either need to move just that child up or maybe the whole group is ready to move up. But I look at that information real closely and I wait until a child has shown me, or a group as a whole, has shown me twice that they're able to read the level that we're working with this high level of accuracy and good comprehension. Or for levels L+, it's this, a little bit different. But the reason why I don't just wait for one book and I'm like, oh, you're good, got to move you up, is because sometimes kids just maybe have a lot of background knowledge on that topic, or they just did really well for whatever reason that day. So I wait for 2 readings and then I make the decision about moving up or not. The good news though is if you move a kid up and it's not a good fit, you can move them right back down. And so for this reason, I don't make a big deal of it. I don't say, hey, you're moving up a level, blah, blah, blah. Because I make mistakes, I'm human, and if I then go back and realize like, oh, they actually weren't ready for this level, it's not a problem. I just change it and they have no idea. So that's why I don't share with the kids or with the parents really when I move them up. And speaking of moving kids up levels and changing things, because you'll constantly take those running records and use your anecdotal notes or checklists or whatever, it'll be easier for you to notice if a child is reading books that are too hard or too easy, and then you can just adjust and rework your groups all the time. Obviously I'm not changing groups constantly, but I would say about every 2 weeks, I really sit down and look like, okay, are there any mismatches? Does anything need to be switched around? And again, that running record data, just that little bit of information can be really helpful in adjusting your groups. Alrighty, again, because we're over time, I'm gonna hold questions until just 1 more minute because I do wanna do our giveaway. I appreciate everybody hanging out for 1 hour and 15, and this is the giveaway. So the giveaway tonight is you can get one of my guided reading packs if you are a winner, and if I call your name in a second here. I recommend getting the level A through N bundle. That would cover you like beginning of kindergarten all the way through basically end of 2nd grade. So if you're a winner, you're welcome to choose any one of these guided reading bundles that I have, but I would recommend the biggest one because why not, right? There's also another component of this that you'll win that I'm going to show you in a minute. But for now, I just want to talk about these bundles. And I know that some of you have them already, so I also want to talk just a little bit about not only what they are, but how to use them. So I have them, I probably didn't even say this, but I have them in different bundles. I also have them individually. It's just levels A through N. And the reason why I created these is because I was doing a lot of planning for guided reading and it was taking forever. I was doing a lot of, not guesswork, but I was forgetting, okay, this group is at this level. What should we be working on? This group is at this level. What should we be thinking about? So it really kind of spells out for you and me, because I use them with my kids, what you should be working on at each guided reading level. It also just helps me change things up and keep my kids engaged because I have different activities for each level. So as they move through the levels, they get to do different things. So that's kind of, why I ended up developing these. So if you win or if you have these resources, here's how I recommend that they be used. In the Start Here file, in the zip file that you have or will have, there's a video. And the video will kind of walk you through the different components. So definitely watch that. And after you watch the video, I highly recommend either if you've got lots of levels or just one level, for whatever level you're looking at, go to the Anchor Lessons file. And in that file, you're going to find lesson plans and printable text to use. They're in color, but they're also in black and white. You can print them single-sided, double-sided, what have you. But just start skimming through the lesson plans and seeing what skills are covered. A cover sheet for each lesson plan that tells you what skills are covered. And so when you're ready to use them with a group, maybe start with Anchor Lesson 1. Have them read the book, follow this plan, but then don't move on to Anchor Lesson 2 yet. The way they're designed to be taught is that each anchor lesson, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever, they all cover basically different skills. So after you teach Anchor Lesson 1, then go and pull. Maybe you've got guided reading books of your own or you print other ones out online. Use the books that you've already got to teach these same skills that are covered in Anchor Lesson 1. And once you feel like the kids are solid because you've taught those skills in other books, there's things in the bundle that you can use with any book. They're not all specific to the books in there. It's super flexible, like comprehension, games, and strategy posters and phonics activities. These can be used with any book. So once you've practiced those Anchor Lesson 1 skills with a couple of books, you've got your assessment stuff going, then come back and teach Anchor Lesson 2 and use the Lesson 2 book. And then again, go back and teach those same skills from Anchor Lesson 2 using your own books, because all this stuff can be used with your own books too. So I mentioned that just because, you know, it can be a little confusing when I've got Anchor Lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you've got your books. Some teachers ask, do I just do all that in order and then I'm done? And it's not really designed to be taught that way. It's designed to be taught like, okay, Anchor Lesson 1 is when you introduce some skills and then you work on them, you work on another text, and then you come back and do Anchor Lesson 2. So it's really designed to be taught more that way. Just a little heads up in case you're using these. The other thing that I mentioned in the giveaway, in addition, if you're a winner to getting the A through N, the big bundle or whatever bundle you want, I also have this pre-A guided reading activity binder set for you. With my pre-A kids, I needed something different, a little bit more hands-on. They're doing the letter sounds and all that jazz. So I created these guided reading activity binders or materials for you to create binders for them. And so if you're a winner and you would like the pre-A resource as well, you can actually get both the big bundle and this resource. I also mentioned before that I use those checklists, really helpful in knowing what to teach and assessing kids. If you've got the guided reading bundles, these are already in here, but just kind of as a side note, I do have them separately if you wanted to get them separately. Just a little heads up. All right, let's do the giveaway. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start calling names, and if and only if you hear your name called, and I'll do your email address too. If you hear your name called, what I would like you to do is just let me know that you're here live. And then afterward, I'll just need you to email me and let me know what bundles you would like. Again, I really recommend just getting the big one, A through N, but you are welcome to anyone. And if you would like, you can also have the pre-A activity binder set, which is just set up a little bit differently than the other materials because they're not reading tons and tons yet. All right, so first winner is Rachel. Rachel.Bates1, and her email is at det.nsw.edu.au. Rachel, if you're here, let us know. Okay, Sonia, SONSCH29 @hotmail.com. Sonia or Sonia, if you're here, let us know. Dana, Maya DM1 @nv.ccsd.net. Dana, let us know if you're here. Rachel's here, woohoo! All right, Rachel, make sure to email me, and then tomorrow I'll send you over all that stuff. Okay, Megan, mjackson613 @outlook.com. Megan, let me know if you're here. Carrie _Bedner @yahoo.com. Carrie, let me know if you're here. And I'll pull one more. Sandra, I think, Vasquez @gmail.com. Sandra, let us know if you are here. All right, so congratulations to my winners. Make sure that you email me too to let me know what you would like. Again, you can have the biggest bundle and the pre-A activity binders if that's something that would be useful to you. If you were not one of my winners, I still do have a sale for you. I've got all of this stuff 20% off through this Friday. So the sale will automatically turn off. It's in my TPT store. I'll put up the link here. Forgot to do that. But it's in my TPT store. The sale is all set up for you, and that will be through this Friday. So if you need any of this stuff and you weren't a winner, you don't already have it, make sure you grab it while it's still on sale. I've got the pre-activity binders and then all the different bundles. Kindergarten bundle is generally A through D. A first grade bundle is generally E through J. But if you have any like lower readers at the beginning of the year, it's more honestly like A through J. Then a second grade average bundle is like K through N. This is your biggest bundle with all the different levels. That's basically like if you've got a big range of readers, K through second. All right, let's do the freebie. If the link to these resources that I just showed you doesn't work, or if the freebie link does not work for whatever, not to worry. I believe I set up the email beforehand to just send you everything afterward. So you should be getting all of this stuff, all these links, if they're not working for you, via email. And that should be coming your way in about like 40 minutes, I think I set it up for. I'll also be sending a recording of this if you missed something or want to rewatch something. If you haven't gotten anything from me by like 24 hours from now, so tomorrow night, then tomorrow night email me and just let me know, and I'll be happy to send you everything. All you need to do to get to me is just reply to one of those reminder emails and it goes to my inbox. So that is all I have for you, but I would love now to stay and answer some questions. And if you do have to go, then I appreciate you being here. I know we went over time. It's almost been an hour and a half. So I really appreciate you coming and staying for so long. If you can stay, though, I would love to answer your questions. So feel free to retype them in the chat so that I make sure not to miss you. Natalie, thank you for coming. Oh, Carrie says the email already came. All right, then you should be good. Rachel, thanks for listening in from Sydney. I know it's probably a different, way different time for you. All right, so Latasha says, do you use the word work time in small group for a whole class phonics skills or skills you notice students need help on from running records? So good question. Generally, when we're doing small groups, I want to make sure that it's really specific to what the kids are working on. Now, I also tend to teach phonics small group at a separate time of the day whenever possible. So pretty much all of my phonics instruction is differentiated. Now, if there's something we're talking about as a whole class and it's also relevant to that small group, then I'll try to bring it in. But generally speaking, Latasha, I really try to make it specific to those kids since they're right in front of me. Naomi says, tips for pre-service teachers. Just don't get too overwhelmed. Just take one thing at a time. I remember that when I was first teaching, I would be absolutely exhausted by October because I was trying to do so much, and you know, it was coming from a good place, of course, but sometimes it's just helpful to take one thing at a time. You know, maybe at first you really focus on guided reading and then you turn your attention to writing. Like, as much as we all want to do all of it all the time, it really will burn you out. So just take it one step at a time and enjoy the ride, I guess. Dana, thank you for coming. Amy says, will you be creating anchor lessons for levels higher than Ed? Amy, I think so in the future. I don't have any like solid plans, but because I'm working with third graders now and maybe even fourth grade next year, I'm creating the stuff. I just haven't, like, it's a whole other thing to put it in a bundle or whatever and get it ready to share with all of you. So long story short, yes, hopefully in the future, because I am creating that stuff for my own kids. Victoria says, thank you so much. I loved every minute of it. Awesome. She's a student, and guided reading isn't something I've learned from my practicum experiences. Yeah, I'm glad that this was helpful. Cassandra's asking about the certificate. Yes, so the email should be set up so that you get the certificate link via email. If you don't get anything by like tomorrow night, just feel free to shoot me an email and let me know, and I will be happy to send it over. Okay, so Michelle says, do you have any resources for seeing good examples of the different error types during reading? Visual meaning and syntax errors. I've not had an opportunity to work with these error types before. So Michelle, I would definitely look at in more detail at those running records that I put in I think I've stuck them in the freebie too, but in the sample data. So you can probably learn a little bit from that. I'm trying to think of, maybe somebody else can chime in with a good resource for it. Michelle, maybe if you email me, I am like a teacher book junkie. So if you're looking for like a teacher book or something, I may have something on my shelves here that I can kind of like look through and point you in the right direction. So feel free to email me. I'm not sure that I can think of anything off the top of my head. Okay, Sue says, I would like to see the 101 since I think that would apply more to my kinder. So Sue, that freebie or that recording is in the freebie. So I'll stick it up there one more time. But I think it's on like the first page maybe of that freebie. That's where you can see the link to 101. And yep, and I think that answers your question. Yep, feel free to share with colleagues too. Andrea, the takeaway slide, I believe, so I believe that maybe is in the freebie or it's in the slides, and the slides should be coming your way too. Good night, Kim. Thank you for coming. Dell, thank you for coming. It's 11:30 a.m. in Tasmania. Natalie says, how much experience do you have with Lucy Hawkins? So Natalie, I do not have a lot of experience. Probably about going on 10 years ago, I had access to, I was teaching kindergarten at the time, and I had access to her old writing units of study. And I don't think I used all of them. I used them like a little bit, didn't receive any training. And I know that her grade level specific units are not totally different, but they're a little bit different. And then I haven't used her reading workshop model. That said, I've read some stuff by her, even though I haven't, used her specific programs or whatever, and I haven't been trained by Teachers College. I've read stuff by her, so I'm kind of familiar with, and I use in my classroom, the workshop models, but it just might not be, her specific way of doing things. I don't know if that helps or not. Naomi, I do have a Facebook group. If you're interested in joining the Facebook group and you're not already in there, it's called K2 Literacy, but you can't find it through Facebook because I made it secret, because otherwise you get like random people trying to sell sunglasses or something in the group. You know what I'm talking about, like spammers. But so what you can do if you are interested in being in the Facebook group is just email me and just say, hey, I want to be in the Facebook group. And then I'll send you like a private invite and you can get in that way so we can, continue the conversation in the future. Okay, so Lori says, let me answer Carrie's question. Carrie, 101, I think the link is on page 1 of the freebie. I'm also going to put up that guided reading resource link. It will be coming to your email though. Okay, Lori, do you cut up the summary sheet and put it in the student's file, or is it just to have to do planning? So Lori, the little summary sheets here, this is more just for my purposes. And if you use, I don't know what assessment system you use, but the benchmark assessment system actually has this cover sheet. And so, the cover sheet has like, it has kind of like similar information on it, but it'll have like the book that you read with them, and then was it instructional, hard, or easy? And then you write like the accuracy, and you write all that information out on the cover sheet. So when I'm done with a kid, I might have read with them like levels E, F, G, and H. And so I have the individual running records, but I take all those papers and I staple them together and I put the cover sheet on top so that anybody who's looking at the kid's file can easily see like, okay, this is how they did with level E, F, G. So that cover sheet is more like what gets saved for record keeping or whatever. And this is just more me so that I can like cut them apart and move them around for my own purposes. Alicia, I'm so glad it was helpful. Awesome. Natalie, I'm so glad. Okay, Carrie says, never mind, found it. Yes. Pia, thank you for coming. Naomi says, I know what you mean about those sunglasses. I'll shoot you an email. Yeah, that's why the group is secret. I also don't want to have to deal with like figuring out, I like to know who people are, know that they're at least K2 teachers before I invite them. Okay, if I have missed your question, just retype it. I'm kind of trying to like scroll through and see what I've missed, but sometimes it gets pushed down and I can't see it. Okay. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions unless I've missed it. I'll give you guys one last second in case you did think of anything else or if I missed it before. Oh, Danielle asked a while ago, how do you go about creating your stories? How do you know what words or topics are good for each level? That is a giant pain, actually. So I love writing the stories, but I use the continuum of, literacy development or whatever by Fountas and Pinnell. And it's a big book. It actually comes in the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system, Danielle. And it tells you like what each text is like and what word length and sentence length and all that. So I use that. and also just my experience with working with published texts of levels, A, B, C. I've actually worked with publishers to write and translate leveled books, so that helped a little bit too when I was creating these books. So I use that experience in the leveled literacy continuum or the literacy continuum, and I also cross-check it with this Lexile tool that's online. So it's kind of a tedious process, but I try to make it as scientific as possible. All right, well, I'm gonna let you all go. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you got some ideas to use in your classroom. If you do think of something later, if you have a question or whatever, feel free to just email me. All you need to do is respond to one of those reminder emails or the emails afterward. If you don't have anything from me by tomorrow night, like the links and stuff, just respond and let me know. Happy to send it over. Also happy to let you into the Facebook group if you're not in there yet. Remember that the sale for the guided reading resources is turning off on Friday. So Friday at midnight Eastern is when it automatically turns off. And until then, everything is 20% off. If you do have any questions about like which bundle or whatever, also feel free to email me. Happy to chat with you. Otherwise, thank you for being here. I appreciate everybody chatting and just sharing ideas. And I'll talk with you soon. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.